To be fully sensible of the facility which will be given to this branch of federal legislation by the assistance of the state codes, we need only suppose for a moment that this or any other state were divided into a number of parts, each having and exercising within itself a power of local legislation. Is it not evident that a degree of local information and preparatory labor would be found in the several volumes of their proceedings, which would very much shorten the labors of the general legislature and render a much smaller number of members sufficient for it? The federal councils will derive a great advantage from another circumstance. The representatives of each state will not only bring with them a considerable knowledge of its laws and a local knowledge of the respective districts, but will probably in all cases have been members and may even at the very time be members of the state legislature, where all the local information and interest of the state are assembled, and from whence they may easily be conveyed by a very few hands into the legislature of the United States. The observations made on the subject of taxation apply with greater force to the case of the militia, for however different the rules of discipline may be in the different states, they are the same throughout each particular state, and depend on circumstances which can differ but little in different parts of the same state. So it's all James Madison, New York Independent Journal, February 15th, 1788. Publius, the Federalist, number 56. The observations made on the subject of taxation apply with greater force to the case of the militia, for however different the rules of discipline may be in the different states, they're the same throughout each particular state and depend on circumstances which can differ but little in different parts of the same state. The attentive reader will discern that the reasoning here used to prove the sufficiency of a moderate number of the representatives does not in any respect contradict what was urged on another occasion with regard to the extensive information which the representatives ought to possess in the time that might be necessary for acquiring it. This information, so far as it may relate to local objects, is rendered necessary and difficult, not by a difference of laws and local circumstances within a single state, but of those among different states. Taking each state by itself, its laws are the same, and its interest but little diversified. A few men, therefore, will possess all the knowledge requisite for a proper representation of them, were the interest and affairs of each individual state perfectly simple and uniform. A knowledge of them in one part would involve a knowledge of them in every other, and the whole state might be competently represented by a single member taken from any part of it. All right, James Madison. On a comparison of the different states together, we find a great dissimilarity in their laws, and in many other circumstances connected with the objects of federal legislation, with all of which the federal representatives ought to have some acquaintance. Whilst a few representatives, therefore, from each state may bring with them a due knowledge of their own state, every representative will have much information to acquire concerning all the other states. The changes of time, as was formerly remarked on the comparative situation of the different states, will have an assimilating effect. The effect of time on the internal affairs of the states taken singly will be just the contrary. At present, some of the states are little more than a society of husbandmen. Few of them have made much progress in those branches of industry which give a variety and complexity to the affairs of a nation. These, however, will in all of them be the fruits of a more advanced population, and will require on the part of each state a fuller representation. The foresight of the convention has accordingly taken care that the progress of population may be accompanied with a proper increase of the representative branch of the government. The experience of Great Britain, which presents to mankind so many political lessons, both of the monitory and exemplary kind, which has been frequently consulted in the course of these inquiries, corroborates the result of the reflections which we have just made. The number of inhabitants in the two kingdoms of England and Scotland cannot be stated at less than 8 millions. Representatives of these 8 millions in the House of Commons amount to 558. Of this number, 1/9 are elected by 364 persons, and 1/2 by 5,723 persons. It cannot be supposed that the half thus elected, and who do not even reside among the people at large, can add anything either to the security of the people against the government, or to the knowledge of their circumstances and interest in the legislative councils. On the contrary, it is notorious that they are more frequently the representatives and instruments of the executive magistrate than the guardians and advocates of the popular rights. They might therefore with a great propriety be considered as something more than a mere deduction from the real representatives of the nation. We will, however, consider them in this light alone, and we will not extend the deduction to a considerable number of others who do not reside among their constituents, are very faintly connected with them, and have very little particular knowledge of their affairs. With all these concessions, 279 persons only will be the depository of safety, interest, and happiness of 8 millions. That is to say, there will be one representative only to maintain the rights and explain the situation of 28,670 constituents in an assembly exposed to the whole force of executive influence and extending its authority to every object of legislation within a nation whose affairs are in the highest degree diversified and complicated. Yet it is very certain not only that a valuable portion of freedom has been preserved under all these circumstances, but that the defects in the British Code are chargeable in a very small proportion on the ignorance of the legislature concerning the circumstances of the people, allowing to this case the weight which is due to it, and comparing it with that of the House of Representatives as above explained, it seems to give the fullest assurance that a representative for every 30,000 inhabitants will render the latter both a safe and competent guardian of the interest which will be confided to it.